Welcome everybody. Oh, okay, let's see. Got it. Okay, can everybody see my screen okay? Yeah, okay. So off the bat, this will be kind of a co-presentation with Drew and I. We work closely, I think, a lot in this space when it comes to digital research, mobile technology, wearable sensor technology at the university. If you have questions, I'd say stop and feel free to, ask them, and we'll also have time at the end, I think, too, as well. But let's see, can I go? Yes, just quickly, I want to give you a quick background, kind of what is it I do, where do I sit within the organization? This is a very large organization, lots of layers, lots of schools. So where do I sit? I think that helps. So I'm in the medical school's Office of Research. I'm with a program called Fast Forward Medical Innovations. And really our team is really focused on three different service lines. One is around commercialization support and resource management, where faculty that are coming up with intellectual property that has the potential to leave the institution in the form of a license or a startup, we want to help de-risk that with some funding and or resource management and support. We also have commercialization education. Again, it helps get you ready, if you will, for some of these commercialization funding mechanisms that are available inside the institution. Really, it's taking academic faculty that are excellent at putting together evidence-generated research projects to get federal grant funding, get a publication out of it, but how do you really kind of change, if you will, or move the needle around that commercialization endpoint? And that education program is really helping you build out what the value proposition is of the idea, perhaps what the FDA pathway would look like, and it really just makes you in a competitive space for commercialization funding. Business development is the third service line. That's the one that I run and represent. I see I got two folks from my team on this call. For the business development team, Shelby and Amelia, one from our education team with Ashley Shork. So today, kind of the goals of this presentation, really, it's kind of, from my perspective, seeing how you can connect with industry, what you should do to be prepared, kind of understanding some of the various models that can happen when you partner with industry in the academic setting. A couple of things to live by: confidentiality, compatibility, and timeline, which is something I keep seeing over and over when it comes to our academic research faculty working with industry. And then just being aware the nuance, the kind of the details in digital and mobile technology, and how you want to build out your research deals with industry. Quickly, research funding, there's lots of different sources of funding. The federal government is obviously the largest that the university has, but we have diverse revenue streams in for research activities, foundations, disease-specific funds, philanthropy, industry. My team has expertise and knowledge in the industry space. That's really where we focus on. So for us, what we're looking at is at the market trends, identifying where companies are in the space and where it can relate to within the university and their strengths around the research ecosystem. We're seeing right now that industry is moving away from an in-house approach to their R&D. They're looking to identify opportunities with academic faculty across the country to help boost, if you will, their technology and their research or their asset pipelines. They're really looking to acquire companies rather than just build it all in-house themselves. So this presents an opportunity for academic centers like the university, where companies are going to want to work with researchers to help develop their technology, and then potentially from there bring it in-house. Now, to focus in on this audience, when we're talking about digital, this space right now is an emerging place. Even though we know about it, big data, wearable sensors, continuous monitoring, there's still a lot of promise and not yet a lot of, let's just say, guideposts around what the federal laws are, what the policies are, as well as what the tools are that we're going to be using. I'm going to focus in the life science space, but this is applicable across the board too as well. And what I want to just make sure that we understand here is that there's a lot of different ways in which companies are engaging the university, as well as our researchers are trying to engage with companies. What I'll try and do is give you a holistic picture of what those can potentially look like and some thoughts and considerations around it, but recognize this is an evolving field. Even when it comes to the guidance around data and who owns data, and depending on the type of data, for instance, in the medical space, for Epic within the Michigan Medicine Health System, there are some pretty clear guidelines. However, those things are changing daily, I would almost say. So keep that in mind as we go forward with this conversation. This is an emerging field, it's growing. So quickly, what we're looking at is that in my world, we're looking to build out the academic industry relationship, and we look at it in the form of a research translational pipeline. What we're looking at is opportunities in the basic science, preclinical, the clinical research space, through real world evidence, phase 4, community research, all with the goal of getting to a translational state where it's a commercial endpoint, right? Where it's going to hit the impact space of the patient or the public good. We recognize that to the far left of this pipeline is the academic researchers. We have great basic scientists and preclinical scientists working in this space, data scientists, but it's going to take industry and translational funding to really commercialize and get it into that care delivery space for us. And so you can see there's a necessary overlap between the academic researcher and the industry partner. And it's one that we, I would say we firmly sit within to try and help balance between the two. Education and mentorship is on both sides of the house, teaching industry how to work with academia, academia working with industry. So for us, many times as I position it, the value proposition of our service is really saying to the company, look, there are a common problem here that we want to both figure out, but we want to approach it differently. A lot of times, one way is this industry wants to do fast. Well, we have a slower approach and we want it to be perfect. That's kind of the academic dogma. So we want to be able to marry between those two so that we get a win-win opportunity out of it too as well. So these are some of the things that we're working on in that space. Ultimately, I want to facilitate productive interactions between industry and our research faculty here. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Within the FFMI Fast Forward group, we've got 3 other individuals, including myself, that help focus on working with industry. We all have different backgrounds and experiences that we bring to bear on this opportunity with Deborah Grega, Amelia Metrokeska, and Shelby Unsworth. I will also mention that outside of the medical school is within innovation partnerships and within Drew's team is a corporate research group. I think Chris Fick is on, but Chris Fick runs that team too as well. And it's a very similar type of service as well. So between our teams, between Fast Forward Medical Innovations and innovation partnerships and corporate research, we can be a facilitator for some of these opportunities that you're working with in your research and with industry. So quickly, who's the customer in all of this? So I look at this as 2 different customers. There's an internal customer base, which is our University of Michigan faculty members, and then the external customers, which is really the industry partners. Inside of the University of Michigan, surrounding our internal customer, the faculty member, is all the different services that university brings to bear, the infrastructure, if you will, to help drive research activities through to completion. And what I've highlighted here are some of the partners that from the med school side, at least because it's a med school presentation, my apologies, but you have different groups that we can help facilitate, ORSP versus innovation partnerships, if it's a foundation opportunity, or within innovation partnerships, the Corporate Research Alliance group, et cetera. And then outside of that, in the external customer space, we have a lot of partnerships and business experience working with companies across the board in pharmaceuticals and med device in the digital space. So for us, this is something that we try and bring to bear is recognizing and messaging the strengths of the university with the external customer industry, as well as messaging into the internal customer with what the opportunities are, the U of M faculty member. What I will tell you is that experience shows when working with and having a good relationship or a deal happen with industry and an academic researcher, it's historical experience, both from an institution perspective, Aura knows how to work with the University of Michigan. We have multiple contracts going with them. And then in addition to that, they have individuals that have worked together as well too. That's an incredibly important, I think, relationship. And we try and expand that out from there too as well. So it's not just one faculty member working with the Aura team. There's other areas that we've branched into from sleep medicine all the way into sports performance. Another thing that I just want to make sure is that the research team has to be engaged, and there's got to be this idea, especially from our academic research teams, is that there's something in it for the company and they're expecting some sort of deliverables. And a lot of times I think that's not always the mindset of our academic researchers, where they're focused on, well, this is my research, I want to do it, I'm going to do it at my pace. You've got to recognize that this is a dance and a duet, and you have to work with the company in this situation, and you have to be mindful of that too as well. Performing well leads to future opportunities. Performing poorly can actually have a detriment and maybe them walking away, not just from working with you, but also with the university in general. So I typically like to highlight here, but I'm not going to get into the details too much of what it is like working with our team, where we talk to the faculty members and learn about the interests and the capabilities of the faculty member, and then engage with the industry partner. I'm just going to fly through these slides a little bit, but recognize that once we find matchmaking opportunities, we recognize that our team is not necessarily the one that's going to be signing the contract, but rather we're going to work and facilitate the key resources, the different services required to execute deals across the institution. So many times think of this as like a catalyzer. What we're looking to do here is get to the right people. If it's intellectual property, we want to go to innovation partnerships. If it's something around, for instance, contractual obligations to do work or whatever, we're going to go to ORSP. If it's budget negotiations, we're working with your research administrative team in that local space. So we want to speed it up if we want to get right to the opportunities. The next thing I want to give some advice on is how you're finding industry partners. So many times people come to me and they go, Mike, do you have a contact at X company? And many times, yes, we can help connect you that way. But the other side that I find that's incredibly valuable is you, the faculty member, and your expertise, your reputation in the field, and your opportunity to network. So many times I try and engage our faculty to be ready at conferences or by new introductions from your other professional colleagues, so that when an opportunity arises, when Apple or Aura is contacting you and asking you a couple of questions about, say, a research project that you were doing, you're ready to talk to them. And sometimes that takes practice. We have different academic lecture series and practice sessions that we can go through with some of our faculty so that they can communicate their science in a way that people can understand it. We present it as the elevator pitch, which I think most people are at least kind of familiar with, especially if you've watched things like, Shark Tank and everything, where, you've got to be very concise in a 30-second manner of what it is that you can do. And it's got to be something that's relatable to the listener. So the elevator pitch, if you're not familiar with it quickly, is just this scenario in which you run into the elevator and lo and behold, the CEO is in the elevator with you. They're riding up to floor 5 with you. So you basically have till floor 5 to present your idea. And for them, as she walks out the elevator, say, I love this idea. Let's have another meeting on this so that we can go forward with the details on this and get you signed up. That's essentially what we're trying to do in this situation. And we want to encourage faculty to be ready to communicate their idea broadly to the audience that they're presenting to, including industry. So what really makes a good value proposition or an elevator pitch? It's the value proposition. It's basically a simplified approach to what it is that's going to be important to that listener, and it's got to be uniquely delivered by you. I think that's really important in terms of, not getting into the details. A lot of our research faculty are really smart, love to get into the gory details. Boring. I'm sorry, but that's it's for a time and a place and an academic presentation. But what we're talking about here is someone, an outside listener that could potentially be funding, supporting, or working with you. And for them, although they think the science is interesting, they want to have something meaningful back to them that resonates with them to want to learn and work with you more. So from our perspective, this is just a slide that kind of highlights what's valuable to an industry partner versus what an academic researcher values. I'm not going to go through this in details, but just recognize that the view and the lens in which you're presenting, if you can keep that in mind and put yourself in the listener's shoes, really can make the difference between whether or not they want to have another follow-up conversation with you and meaningful conversations that leads to academic research together with an industry partner. I'm going to skip over the dealship milestones here and just go right to this pipeline quickly so people kind of understand at a high level, how do you work with an industry partner and kind of run it through the institution? And I have some details on that. We'll just see if time permits. But quickly, what it is when a company in a sponsor in an industry, a company and an academic researcher wants to work together, the goal here is you want to align expectations. I want to do X, company wants to do Y. And we want to make sure that in writing, we can line up what those expectations are and then get into the deliverables of exactly what it is that you're going to be working on to meet those goals, those expectations you've outlined. And the statement of work is typically that document, an SOW that outlines the deliverables, right? I'll do this, give you that, you give me Y, I give you Z. That's exactly how that'll go. And then from there, that document can then build out your budget and your milestones. It's going to cost to deliver this X dollar amount. I'm going to get it done in 6 months, right? Back and forth we go in terms of what the deliverables are written in the statement of work, guides the budget and the milestones. After that, verbally agreed upon with, and as well as in writing some of these expectations, we can route it through for legal and regulatory review. This is where ORSP comes in. This is with innovation partnerships come in when they're looking at intellectual property terms. They're looking at the commitments, if you will, around indemnification if it involves subjects, let's say, or publication rights or data use. These are some of the things that are going on as well. And then we have our contract execution. Once it's signed, both sides have agreed, industry as well as University of Michigan, the project can get started. I will say quickly, I just highlighted something in like 30 seconds, which takes typically 30 days or 30 months, right? I mean, depends who we talk to the faculty on, but that's essentially how we want this to go forward. And one of the things that you want to do is you want to engage different team members early on in the process to help you with this. From our perspective, when we're involved in this conversation, we're looking for the right fit between the academic partner and or the academic researcher and the industry partner. We want to make sure that there's an alignment. Common goals and operational and philosophical expectations being the same is critically important. If they are not, even if they're giving you a ton of money to do your research, if they're asking ridiculous things of you, that's a very painful relationship. In fact, it typically will happen where you get done with it and you just go, God, I'll never work with them ever again. I promise you, if you're not philosophically aligned, the money does not matter in that situation. So you need to be philosophically aligned. And we're here to try and help line that up too as well. And then bring in key partners as well too, in terms of lining up intellectual property terms, the financials, if you will, and the budget. So then that way it's a win-win opportunity and both sides feel like they've gotten something out of it too. So I'll quickly go through some of the industry sponsored deals, and then I kind of highlight some of the data specific ones too. I think that are germane to the audience here. So typically we have a couple of different types of sponsored industry deals. There's sponsored research. This is this classic 22,000 code, if you will, for the university as well. And basically what we're talking about is potentially working in the bench science space. This is a space where, there's intellectual property potentially being generated. On the clinical trials front, this is the 32,000 within other sponsored research, but it's specific for clinical trials and human subject research. We do a lot of work in that space in the med school. We're looking at strategic alliances as well too, where these are potentially pre-competitive. These are IP generating opportunities where institutionally speaking, the university and that outside entity are agreeing to work together. We have a couple of common goals specified out that we're going to work on together, and that within that there's subsequent work orders specifically aligning towards the strategic alliance that's binding the two institutions together. There's also consulting opportunities. So companies are always looking for the leaders and the key opinion leaders across the institution. So we highly encourage our academic researchers to engage in consulting with industry. That leads to other opportunities with that company, as well as it broadens your network across the nation, across the industry space. Last, we have other sponsored research activity. Think of this as really, it's a fee for service, where a lot of times a company says, hey, you know how to do this really well. For instance, test my algorithm and send it back to me and just tell me if it works or not as a validation. Or maybe it's a service contract where it's a data use opportunity where generate all this information for me in this population and give it to me and go away. I'm being general on that one, but that's essentially what they're looking for in that situation. That's other sponsored activity. Other things I just want people to just kind of be aware of quickly, and that is that confidentiality, when to use it. I recommend that if you're not sure, don't disclose, and you can just be upfront with people in that space. The elevator pitch is supposed to be a non-confidential presentation. What you want to do is be able to just give enough information for them to at least have some, working knowledge of it. But anything that you're not sure about, hold off and say, let's have another follow-up meeting, and you can contact folks like myself, and we can help you decide and put in a non-disclosure agreement if you need to. Words to live by are things like if the presentation or the data you're about to talk about is unpublished or it's not in the public domain, stop, wait, let's get it under NDA first. Same goes for the company too as well. If they want trade secrets, they want to make sure that it's under NDA. They typically are pretty good about that. I want to also say companies like to ask sometimes, well, how much is it going to cost? Okay, don't give numbers until you know what it is. If they just say, hey, I just want a bunch of ECG tracings, one leads, a couple hundred. You go, oh yeah, it's probably like a couple $1,000. And then you get the written deliverable and it's 15,000 ECGs. Well, you right away have anchored into a dollar amount that they're thinking, well, I kind of get that. My recommendation is don't need to talk numbers until you kind of have a better idea of what deliverables are. Even if you come up with big assumptions in writing of what we're doing, and then give rough numbers. And then the last thing is the timelines. Competitive, especially in the digital space, right? This is a competitive field. They're trying to get things done, products to market, and time is a competitive advantage here. So keep that in mind, and that the academic progress that we're used to taking is not necessarily the same. And just setting up expectations with the company is critical to that. So what are some of the digital ones that I'm seeing in this space that people can think about? So there is the classic sponsored research activity, right? Where company access funding all the activities that are going on in this space, and there's a shared, if you will, research question that's trying to be answered. There's also an opportunity around in-kind research activities where basically I've seen companies like Fitbit, they'll give in-kind, where they'll give the device to the faculty member either at a research discount or at no cost. And it's basically just you can have this, thank you very much. There's a procurement opportunity where you, the university faculty member, can set up a procurement and purchase the device and or some sort of app, if you will, so that you buy it and then you wholly own it. There's shared access where maybe there's some money going back and forth between what you're purchasing in terms of equipment, but maybe the shared piece is the actual data itself, the API, for instance, that the company owns and that they get some of that information, you get some of that information. The last is the data supplier, which I've seen a lot of actually, where companies, they will pay for basically all the information that they have on a question and they want to have access to it. You may be able to keep some of that data as well, but they own it. They're the ones that are paying for it. They want the population studied and all the data sent over to them. So the last thing I'll go over then is, with all these types of deals, there's lots of different services you potentially have to engage with. And I'm going to hand off to my colleague, Drew, to kind of talk through some of the innovation partnerships approaches to these as well. But other ones that I've got highlighted here, engaging with our Fast Forward team around business development early on in the process can help shepherd you into, or at least think about and set expectations around different areas that you should be engaging with. For instance, the Data Office of Clinical and Translational Research, that's DOCTR. It may be that if it's involving Michigan Medicine medical records and or our patients, there's the Data and Biospecimen Committee that's unique to the University of Michigan and the medical school. Whether or not we should be working with innovation partnerships around IP, or if we're talking with regulatory affairs, if there's a conflict of interest, trust me, I'll say we get lots of those too as well. So who you represent, if it's the company versus if you are the academic research faculty member here at U of M, regulatory affairs needs to be involved. The other piece that I think is really tricky, and I'm not going to be the expert here, but I want people to be aware of, is the health information technology services and the information technology services. So if you're in the medical school, that's HITS. If you're off med school campus, but you're still involving technology, that's the IT services, ITS group. I have to tell you, it's kind of hard to know exactly who's doing what. They merge up and everything. One of the best pieces of advice I can give is working with contacts, even working with me and then me connecting you with others, for instance, or working with Drew and connecting with others, or Chris. This is a great opportunity to do that because I think it continues to change at this point in time. And depending on the situation and the type of deal that you're working with the outside company with and the access that they're getting, certain things, for instance, like a core review needs to be done. That can take 6 months depending on the situation, okay? And I put that out there only because that's important if you're trying to get something done in 2 months, right? And you've been talking already with the company for a month, so you got less than a month to get this all done. So I highly encourage people to kind of come engage our groups because of the complexity and the uniqueness of each and every one of these projects. Based on, as I said before, some of these different deal types may or may not require these different services that I've just highlighted. So with that, I take a deep breath and I'll hand it off to my colleague, Drew Bennett.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
So I want to do a very, very quick overview of innovation partnerships. I think one of the things that Mike highlighted, which if you don't remember anything else from what I'm about to say, is that we partner very, very closely with the FFMI team to basically navigate a lot of what I'll call generally complex situations. There's a couple of pieces here on the innovation partnership side that I think are super relevant to this group. So we'll spend a little bit of time digging into that and hopefully giving you just a basic flavor of how innovation partnerships can help. If you can go to the next slide, Mike. Fundamentally, the charter of our group is really to try and help you with whatever you're working on from a research standpoint, navigate that commercialization, translational bridge, if you will, from an academic project to something that's going to get out into the world and have impact. And I say that in a broad sense because oftentimes I think people who have had an arm's length relationship with our office, we were formerly Tech Transfer, I think people tend to think and see that always as a true commercial, as in money is changing hands type of activity. I would tell you that many times is certainly the case, but the reality is there are also many circumstances where the best mechanism for what you have to get out into the world, especially when it comes to software and content, is in an open access or an open source mechanism that allows lots of people to have broad access to that particular effort they put forward. So just a little highlight that it doesn't necessarily equate to a big commercial financial impact. It can be something where we're simply trying to provide access to tools or content that are going to make a difference to people. Move to the next slide, Mike. Our group really has 3 pillar activities that we're involved with, as listed here. The center group's the group that I work with, the licensing group. So if you develop something at the University of Michigan, traditionally utilizing federal funding, and even sometimes when you're doing corporate type of funding, our job is to help facilitate, once that has kind of come to the conclusion as far as that project, understanding what the output was from an intellectual property standpoint. So in the simplest sense, there's usually a deliverable at the end of it. If that happens to be a piece of software or a software application or a piece of content, a therapeutic, compound identification, a medical device, there is a requirement at the end of that with respect to federal funding where that is disclosed to the agency. And our office facilitates that process. It's called BIDOL compliance. You may get a note once in a while where you wonder, what's this note about? Because they're asking you, hey, did you submit an invention disclosure? Our group can help you with that. Basically, it's identifying again what it is and what the university's position is with respect to the intellectual property. Many times that is we're going to pursue a patent or force some form of formal IP protection. Other cases, we're going to pursue copyright or some other form of intellectual property protection. And as I just mentioned, sometimes that's we're going to turn this loose as an open access or freely available piece of content through a license such as Creative Commons or open source. We report that back to those agencies. That checks that box. Super important. That compliance is a really big deal. And it's a big deal because ultimately they're going to come back and they will ask, and you want that box checked, and we certainly can help with that. Many times that content becomes really attractive from the standpoint of, boy, this can have an impact on patient care. And there are a lot of interested commercial parties, and that's where the license agreement negotiations aspect of what we do comes into play, where we will work on behalf of you and the university with that third party to negotiate a license, and then the transfer of the intellectual property, the code, the material, the molecule, et cetera, to that organization for them to commercially develop it. We monitor that process. We work with them. We help facilitate the activity of getting it into the marketplace and giving it its best chance to succeed. And then broadly, we have a really significant part of my team's practice is really software, content management, and distribution, and then promoting that. I'll talk specifically about two particular things that we do that I think for this group are super relevant. The other 2 groups in our office are the venture group. The venture group does a lot of what's called translational research funding. Mike mentioned a couple of different of those mechanisms, but it's basically things that are going to help move whatever project you have along the commercial continuum to improve its probability of success once it gets to the marketplace. Sometimes that's additional testing or validation. Other times that's incremental development. It can be any variety of things. The other primary aspect of that group is really the entrepreneurial side. We have a lot of PIs and faculty and other folks within Michigan who are super interested in doing a startup. I spent 25 years in the commercial software business before I came here. I was in 6 different startups. I always recommend people have that experience if they can get it. It's super educational. It can be a lot of fun. It can be a lot of work. But certainly the venture group is here to help with that. And they connect you to resources and mentorship and venture capital and other things to help facilitate that and give you the greatest opportunity of success. I always tell people, if I had a fraction of the resources that are available to Michigan-based IP, I would have been doing backflips, to be honest with you. I just would have been out of my mind with happiness about it, because it's a really, really unique and powerful set of resources. One of those is the last bullet you see there, which is incubator space here inside of NCRC and Building 520. It's a pretty significant, unique asset that the University of Michigan can provide. And then lastly, Alliance Group, which works very closely, again, with Mike and the FFMI team, really is trying to be that connective fabric for everything from industry development and research partnerships and collaborations. And, there's a broad spectrum of things going on there and a mix of activities. But really trying to connect those dots, make that as easy as possible, help facilitate those agreements, all of that activity, so that you can stay focused on the aspect of the research and get those things done. So those are the three buckets of what we do. If we can go to the next slide, please, Mike. A couple of things I wanted to highlight are programs that our office runs on behalf of the university. One of those is called Digital Discovery. So Digital Discovery for people, it was built about 10 years ago and predominantly to help people in med school. It's really what I call non-software native folks to fundamentally form up your first stage idea in a way that allows you to have two really super important conversations. And that's fundamentally describing what it is that you have, why it's important, what problem you're solving, so that you can talk to a sponsor about that and somebody who's actually going to help fund that. That can be a department head, that can be an internal translational activity, that can be an external grant opportunity. And the second part of it is to facilitate having a conversation with a technical resource, somebody who can build it. So somebody who actually can code your program into a technical representation that actually facilitates it happening. This is a very short program. It lasts anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. It's on a rolling basis. And it's fundamentally, I always tell people show up with a cocktail napkin or half a Word doc that says, I'd really like to build X, Y, and Z. And it started as somebody saying, I want to build a mobile app to do X, but they didn't know how to do anything else. So the key deliverables out of this process are a couple of really important components to help those two conversations. One is to help you develop your value proposition. So very concisely, why is it valuable? Why is it important? What problem is it solving? The second part is to define the top 10, 15, sometimes 20 core use cases. So if this thing is to be used in a setting, what is the manner in which it is used? And we help articulate those. And then the third part tends to be the one where people get super excited about it because it's kind of the picture is worth 1,000 words. Is we have a series of interns from the School of Information who are majoring in user interface design, and they help build out a set of wireframes that is an actual representation of what screens may look like and the actual experience of a user. The second part they do is what's called a clickable comp. It's fundamentally a simulation of what that application, whether it's a website, mobile app, tablet application, would look like in that core use case if somebody were using it. I kind of use a very bad analogy, I suspect, to describe that, but it's essentially, if you think of something like the weather app, it's that experience of saying, hey, I'm trying to look for the weather for the next week at whatever location, and that process, and that's what that screen looks like. And then the final part is really a technical and compliance footprint that says, how big a project is this? Is it a garage? Is it a shoebox, a garage, or a skyscraper? And is it something that's likely to be regulated predominantly from an FDA or a security standpoint? So that's that program. It's available. All you have to do is reach out to us, go to our website. It's on the website, and we're happy to help with that at any point in time. So I thought this group might be interested in that. Next slide, please, Mike. So the second to last piece is mobile publishing. Our office, because it is a licensing activity, is the publishing facilitator for the mobile app stores. So for the Google Play Store and for the Apple Store, for the University of Michigan, our office actually is the person who's going to help facilitate getting your app onto those storefronts. So every individual publisher has an account. There's only one account per publisher. The university only has one account, and we help work with the developers, whether they're internal or external, as well as the PIs and the research groups to publish the app if it's going to be published on behalf of the University of Michigan. So that's really a combination of getting that core code, the Xcode or the APK, and getting those things ready to go through the process of hitting submit and getting it up on the App Store. And we have a pretty structured mechanism by which to do that. There's some very specific information that's needed by the storefronts. We work very closely with ITS, which helps with the technical build. We work with outside resources who have built these things for third parties. Many times people will come to us and it will be Menlo Innovations or Arbor Moon or New Foundry or any number of other outside agencies have built the application for you, but you still want to publish it through Michigan. There's a lot of reasons you should want to do that. Certainly when people search on a Michigan-based app, the aggregation point that leads to 90+% of the time is going to be the Michigan storefront. Certainly the other parts that we help with are things like IRB compliance, HIPAA compliance, all those things are part of that process, but certainly something we're here to help reduce that friction, if you will, in getting that process done. A few other things that I would point to about the app side of it, there at any given time, we're running between 125 and 200 mobile apps. I just looked before the meeting here today. We have 140 live apps on behalf of the university that are running. We have a dedicated person who spends a lot of her time, Joanne Allen, monitoring what the storefronts require to keep your app up and running. And if you've been involved with this process in the last couple of years, you would be surprised at some of the things that happen. We help facilitate getting a number of COVID tracking apps up, which required actually an endorsement from a third-party health system for that to actually happen. Very complicated process. Each of the storefronts has gone through different types of activities with respect to compliance. If you put an app up and you don't keep it up to speed, what happens? They shut it down. Well, if you don't know that and the vendor you're working with isn't communicating well with you, that can happen without your knowledge. We've facilitated very closely with the field about that. And there's another set of things inside of the research kit, sensor kit, other areas of activity that we help co-facilitate on behalf of, again, Michigan's publishing app, because there is only one account, again, on an institution level. It's actually held at a tax ID level. So if you're doing mobile publishing, we'd love to help you try and make that as easy as possible. And then just wrapping up in the last slide, we help work with a lot of activity. There's over 500 inventions that come into our office on an annual basis. They're from all across the university, every school and college, certainly a big footprint in the med school, big footprint in engineering. But our goal is to help you make that as effective as possible. There's a lot of different pieces in that process, but certainly we're here to help and want to make sure that people know that we're here to avail ourselves to you and facilitate that. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Drew. So a couple other things I wanted to highlight too in a little bit of detail is it's a fairly new policy that the medical school has in play. I like to bring this up whenever we talk about data and working with industry. Drew and I have for several years now been participants with a front row seat on this one, but quickly, this is a policy established back in 2018 that Dean Runge has put in place, whereby companies that want to work with University of Michigan medicine patients and getting access to that information has to go through this data and biospecimen policy. So what's in scope is human subject data, subject material, that's not a clinical trial. And the clinical trial is based on the NIH definition, which is basically a drug intervention and or behavior modification based on protocol specific activities. So in that situation, basically anything in this space that's a data transfer over to a company, it's going to hit this committee. And really what they're looking for in the tenets of the policies kind of listed here. I give kind of the 5 Cliff Notes versions of it, and I can send this out if you want to. This is on the SPG page of the university. Number 1, they want informed consent of the patient population that's being shared or impacted in this agreement. Number 2 is they need cost neutral budgeting. What that means is that it can't cost the university any money to pull out of those samples from the freezer and ship them off or accumulate the data, aggregate it, and send it off. It's got to cost 0 to us. The company has to pay for that. There's a $5,000 transfer fee what that covers is the committee's review and processing. And think of it similar to what an IRB fee is. Same type of thing, where if there's human subject activity going on, IRB is going to review that. There is a cost associated with that. Next, the committee can make a suggestion around fair market value, and that's what Drew and I tend to be involved in. Basically, the question is the data or materials that are being transferred in the transaction, is there some sort of intrinsic value? Is there something that the market would bear in which we should be negotiating some sort of dollar amount for that? And in which case we would do the due diligence on that, negotiate a market rate price on that. And again, part of the contract as it runs through, there would be payment upon exchange of the data or the goods. The last is contract language, in which ORSP will review and make sure that there's secondary use language in that space. Basically, the spirit of that is that data that's Michigan's is not something that goes to the company and then they turn around, flip it, and sell it to another company. That's essentially what it turns into. We require, from a institution perspective, that this committee review and approve everything in terms of activities before the contract is signed by ORSP and the company. So my advice is in the situation in which a company comes to you and says, hey, I would love all this information that you have from Michigan Medicine patients, that you come talk to Drew or I to help get you into the checklists that are required for the committee to review, so that it's working in parallel with your communication with both the company as well as it routing through the institution. If that doesn't happen, that's okay, but it will get stopped at ORSP or with innovation partnerships if it's just a material transfer agreement. And it comes back to us, and then we go through that process quickly to help you move it through the system. Not every company is going to agree to this. Not every single deal that we have done is going to be that has patients that have informed consent, and in which case the committee will make suggestions, and they do try and set up standard best practices going forward in this space. So if you have questions about that with the population in this space, or you think that it is, reach out. I think that we can help, at least early on in the process, to help set expectations going forward. I'll stop for a quick second because I see a chat in the thing, but is there any questions or anything? Let's see. Is this covered under DUA? Anastasia asked this. Are you asking this for the data and biospecimen, Anastasia?
Yeah, I feel like this process is taken care of under a data use agreement, right? If it's an external, no, or is this in addition to?
So if it involves Michigan Medicine patients, you need to have two separate conversations. One that you can route through depending on the type of agreement, if it's a PAF or an UFA, that's a data use. But you're also going to need to engage the data and biospecimen committee as well too, separately. You are going to need to do that. So it's a separate conversation. I should have put this on my slide deck, but I'll send this out afterwards. Cheryl Flanagan is the director of that committee and your intake person. That'll get you the checklist. But you, the study team, must engage the committee. Otherwise, it's going to get stopped at ORSP and they're going to say, hey, you're going to need a data and biospecimen review uploaded into your PAF or your UFA before we'll finish processing it. So good question. Let's see, we got another chat question. I want to make sure. I think you used the term de-risk when describing how your office can help faculty. Can you say more about what you see as the key risks with industry partnerships? So quickly, Adrian, this was a question that had to do with commercialization funding mechanisms and how we de-risk the technology so that it's in a position where companies would want to license it. That's what I meant by that. When we're talking about industry partnerships, it depends if we're talking research versus if a company wants to essentially acquire that technology. So let me just be clear, is that when I say de-risk, it's they want to make sure that the technology is in a space where, let's say they know the indication of use now, they know perhaps that, it's something that they can go to into a company with and continue forward with fundraising. So that's essentially what I meant by that piece there on the de-risk. Did that answer your question, Adrian?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Okay, so how much time do we have, Victoria? I know it's close to time, I think, right? 1:30 is our stoppage.
Yes, and if we can have a couple of minutes at the end, that would be great.
So what I'm going to just quickly do is maybe kick to the end here. I was going to do a quick comparison, but I think that that's okay. I think what I'll just do is go right to the back here so that we have time for any other questions. So, in summary, so as you can hear from Drew and I's talk quickly, there's a lot of different resources. We're resource rich here in terms of faculty researchers working in the institution, but there's a lot of different processes and there's not one standard way of doing everything quite yet, is what I'll say. And depending on the research opportunity and or the play that you want to have around the commercialization front, engaging resources like my team, Drew's team, Chris and Innovation Partnership in the Corporate Research Group, Victoria and her group as well too, and Kathy Goldstein in the core there. These are all, I would say, and recommend that you engage the network that you have available. We're happy to help guide you, even if it's not in our shop, to the right folks as well. And hopefully this talk gives you just a high level in terms of what the process could look like, but recognizing that as this continues to evolve, this isn't the gospel. I know we're recording this right now, but I imagine that even next year, we're going to look at this and there's going to be different steps and procedures in play here potentially. And I would just say be open and mindful of those two as well. And that having presentations and network conferences like this, I think help everybody raise up in terms of what we should be thinking about when it comes to your digital mobile research studies, and how best to get them through and setting expectations. So I'll stop there and ask any questions and open for the last few minutes here.